Okay, so now that we've sort of met the five major powers that fought in World War One, again, that's Britain, France, Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. Now we're going to look at the alliances that formed. So the topic of today is the system of alliances, which had a very large role in kind of helping start World War One, which we'll talk about next week. So as you can see on the map, the countries in blue formed the Triple Entente, and that would be Britain, France, and Russia. And the countries in red, which are Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, were the Triple Alliance or the Central Powers. And later on, the Ottoman Empire is going to join the red countries, or the Triple Alliance, and Italy is going to leave the red countries, or the Triple Alliance. But again, alliances played a very large role in World War One, or why it started. So we're going to look at that today. All right, so the German alliance system. So Germany and Austria are right next to each other on the map, and in 1879 they became allies. So again, these were the two empires in Europe that were weaker than the others. They had been formed later. They didn't have as many colonies. They felt like the rest of Europe didn't respect them. So they shared a common goal, which was to protect what they already had and to kind of gain respect from the rest of Europe. Again, they were also very afraid for their empires, and they felt a need for allies. And part of that is they're literally in the center of Europe. So they're kind of surrounded by these other big, more powerful empires. So they joined together to form an alliance. So what Germany was specifically afraid of is that French desire for revenge. So remember that France and Germany, part of their border is the region Alsace-Lorraine that has a lot of resources in coal and steel and a lot of German-speaking people. Remember, France had lost that region to Germany in 1870, around that time. So Germany had control of the territory that France really wanted, and Germany was afraid that France would try to take it back. Germany had also been shut out of the race for colonies. So since they formed in 1871, they missed out on the sort of race for colonies that the rest of Europe went through. So again, Britain had colonies all over the world. So did France and like the Netherlands. But Germany missed out on that. So again, they were afraid of not having the same resources and like large empires that the rest of Europe had. And the last thing they were afraid of was being surrounded by enemies. Again, they're in the center of Europe. They're surrounded by France, Britain, Russia, three very powerful, large empires, and they're nervous about that. Austria, the weaker of the two empires, was also afraid of the hungry neighbors who wanted some of their land. So that would be Serbia. So remember, Serbia is that teeny tiny country just to the south of Austria-Hungary, and they want to form a larger nation that has all of the Serbs and also the Croatians and the Bosnians, or the Croats and the Bosnians. So Serbia wanted to take some of Austria-Hungary's land. Russia also wanted to encourage some of the ethnic groups to break away and form their own country so that Russia could have access to warm water ports. So remember, Russia's number one goal is to get warm water ports on the eve of World War I, and they're encouraging some of the ethnic groups within the Austria-Hungary Empire to break away from Austria so that Russia can have access to the Adriatic Sea and then the Mediterranean. Austria is also afraid of revolts from within. Remember, their empire has a large chunk would be Austria and Hungary, but then there were a lot of smaller ethnic groups within the empire, all of whom are different ethnic groups, different religions, different cultures and languages and customs, not very unified. So they're afraid of people revolting from within. Now, Germany and Austria were allies. Germany also wanted to form an alliance with Russia to avoid being surrounded. So again, they're surrounded by Britain, France, and Russia. And they wanted to form an alliance with Russia, but what made it awkward is that they're also allies with Austria. And remember, Russia's trying to have small countries break away from Austria. So Germany can't really be friends with both Russia and Austria since Russia's trying to mess with the ethnic groups within Austria. So again, Germany wanted to form an alliance with Russia so that they wouldn't be surrounded by enemies, but it was impossible to be allies with both Russia and Austria when one of them is trying to sort of destabilize the other. Now, part of the alliance system with Germany included Italy. So Italy joined, but then later left. And Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire also joined the German alliance system. Now, at one point in history, the Ottoman Empire was incredibly powerful and sort of was creeping into Europe. They almost got as far as Vienna, but they were defeated. On the eve of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was on the verge of collapse. So they've been referred to as sort of the weak man of Europe because they weren't as powerful as they had been. So poor Germany is kind of allied with two weaker empires in Europe, and they know it. So the other side of World War I are Britain, France, and Russia. So in 1892, and you'll notice this is like 20 years before World War I breaks out. So World War I starts in 1914. These alliances were formed 20 to 30 years before the breakout of World War I. So in 1892, France and Russia formed an alliance. And part of it is because their biggest enemies were allies. So when Germany and Austria formed an alliance, it kind of forced France and Russia to form an alliance because France's biggest enemy, of course, is Germany because Germany has that Alsace-Lorraine region that they want. And Russia's Austria's biggest enemy because Russia's trying to mess with the ethnic groups in Austria and force them to break apart. So because Germany and Austria became allies, it forced France and Russia to be allies. France also loaned Russia the money to build a railroad across Russia. So, trains in the 1800s were becoming this big new thing. And you can see on this map. So this is sort of looking at Russia. And you can see that the Trans-Siberian Railway is that red line, and it goes all the way across the continent of Russia. Now, when we talk about the Russian Revolution in a few units, the Trans-Siberian Railway is going to play a large part in the Russian Revolution. But we're not there yet. That's in 1917. But again, France loaned Russia the money to build that railway, so they're pretty comfortable being allies. And then, of course, the other ally that joins the Triple Entente is Britain, the other major ally, I should say. So in 1904, so about 15 years after France and Russia became allies, Britain became allies with France. And the reason is both disliked Germany. Now, for hundreds of years, the two biggest European powers that fought each other were France and Britain. So, if you think back to 9th grade history, the 100 Years' War was fought between Britain and France, or England and France at the time. So they have a long history of fighting each other. However, in the 1900s, they both disliked Germany so much that they became allies because of it. So they would rather be allies against Germany than keep fighting each other. So, and again, they have pretty similar countries. They speak different languages, but they're pretty similar. Now, France and Britain also had some disagreements about their colonies, but they decided that they could compromise those so that they could focus on Germany. So again, Britain and France ally in 1904. And since France is allies with Russia, that means Britain is also going to be allies with Russia. So 3 years after France and Britain become allies, in 1907, Russia and Britain become allies. Now, again, both were friends with France, so they kind of have a mutual friend, but they didn't really get along as well as Britain and France and as well as France and Russia. Part of that, again, goes back to Russia's desire for a warm water port and access to water, again, which helps trade, helps transport troops. Their biggest disagreement with Britain is that they want access to the straits, but again, Britain has the #1 navy, so they're pretty powerful. So they can't agree about who will control the straits. And by straits, we mean kind of under Norway and Sweden. You can see there's some water and some channels between land masses, and there's also the straits between Bulgaria and Turkey where they just touch. So kind of the biggest issue with this is even though Britain and Russia are allies, they're pretty shaky allies. So they're not like best friends or, but they're allies, but they're not super happy about it. So this is the system of alliances on the eve of World War One. So again, they started about 20 to 30 years before World War One breaks out. But it's going to play a huge part in why things happen. It kind of sets up this possible domino effect where if someone goes to war, well, if you're allies, you also have to go to war. And we're going to look at that next week.